On today's Murder, She Wrote podcast, Jessica goes to a lakeside inn with Father Mulcahy from MASH and a slew of other suspects when she has to solve the murder of the mysterious lady in the lake. Hello and welcome to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, where I watch every single episode of the hit 80s/90s show Murder, She Wrote, starring 3-time Academy Award nominee and 5-time Tony Award winner Miss Angela Lansbury. Today I'm going to be talking about Season 2, Episode 7, A Lady in the Lake. Air date November 10th, 1985. As always, if you're new to the Murder, She Wrote podcast, I spoil everything there is to spoil about the episode, the murderer, the suspects, and everything in between. You can't have a Murder, She Wrote podcast without that. Without doing it that way. I have reached 100 subscribers! Yes! Oh my goodness, I know that some of you are here because of the Murder, She Wrote podcast. I know that there are some people that subscribed to my channel a long time ago because of me putting the Into the Woods original Broadway cast on there. I had the DVD that I found at Goodwill and put it on there because a lot of people were wanting that and it wasn't available. So I put it on there, not thinking anyone would care, and it is like my most viewed video. And a lot of people subscribe to my channel so they can go back and watch it whenever they want to. And then some came because of the Baywatch podcast, but I had to stop doing that because it was not a good show to talk about on a podcast. And one of my most viewed videos was when I talked about the Are You Afraid of the Dark reboot, which I hated with a burning passion, and I also reviewed Frozen 2. So I've come a long way, and I got a lot of subscribers because of my Little House on the Prairie reviews, and of course the Murder, She Wrote podcast. Thank you so much for all the support that my two wonderful Facebook groups have given me, All Things Murder, She Wrote and Jessica Fletcher Murder, She Wrote. Your support has meant the world to me, and I'm so happy that I'm able to do this, and I'm having so much fun doing it, and I swear it's not going to take me a whole year to get Season 2 done. I am fully committed to this. I even decided not to go ahead and do a Little House on the Prairie podcast because I don't know if I mentioned this, in an episode before, but I have ADD. It's really hard for me to focus and be able to do this. So trying to take on another podcast on top of this one, I'm doing so good with this one that I'm not gonna try to get the other one done. So I decided not to do that one, just to focus entirely on this one because I love Murder, She Wrote. And Murder, She Wrote fans are so awesome. So are Little House on the Prairie fans. But I still plan on doing my review of Season 7, 8, and 9 of Little House on the Prairie. Might just do that today. Have not decided. So without further ado, just wanted to say thank you for everyone who subscribed. Whatever reason you subscribed, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for subscribing and telling me that you love what I'm doing. I appreciate it so much. So, without further ado, let's dive into this episode of Murder, She Wrote, A Lady in the Lake. It is my favorite episode. It features the second appearance by Seth Hazlitt, played by William Window. Seth made his first appearance in Joshua Peabody Died Here, possibly. So it's nice to see him back. And of course, Sheriff Tupper is in this episode as well. And Harry, the realtor in town, played by John Austin, which we are not gonna go over his credentials. This is not his last episode of Murder, She Wrote. And I know something happens to him. I can't remember exactly what. I know that that something happens and Eve Simpson becomes the main realtor in town, which is also a really great character. So let's dive in. We find ourselves at a beautiful lake. I'm not entirely sure what lake it's supposed to be, but this episode is set in Cabot Cove because that's why Seth and Sheriff Tupper are in it. And Jessica is going to this lakeside inn. Oh, and also, one more thing that I wanted to point out. My last episode, Reflections of the Mind, I wasn't saying I didn't like the episode. I did like that episode. It was really great. But I just wish that the writers had done a better job of letting us get to know Francesca a little bit before she was driven crazy so that we could root for her. But I really liked the episode. I loved just the twists and turns and the gaslight aspect of it. So anyway, back to this episode. Sorry, just wanted to clarify that. Because I think someone wondered, well, did you like the episode or something? I think somebody commented in one of the Facebook groups, not sure which one. But anyway, Harry has brought Jessica to this lakeside inn. He is trying to sell it to a woman named Grace. And he tells Jessica that this would be perfect because she's apparently writing a book about people staying at an inn and there's murder. And that reminds me of, if you're a fan of the book series, Murder, She Wrote book series, that was originally written by Donald Blain, B-A-I-N. He recently passed away. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but he kept Jessica alive for us in book form. The books are told in first person from her point of view. And I read one at the start of this year that I bought called Murder of 12, where Jessica stays at an inn because her house is being renovated for some reason. And there's a big snowstorm and she is stranded there and people start getting murdered one by one and she has to solve the crime. Awesome book, could not put it down. This new author is really good that does it along with Jessica. They put Jessica Fletcher, like she's the author, even though it's more of the other author. But it was really good. And I loved Donald's books. I really did. I thought that he did a very good job of keeping Jessica alive for us. And I have a book I found at my local flea market called A Question of Murder that I'm going to read this summer. And I'll tell you what I think of that one. And then I have another one that I'm going to read. It's a Murder, She Wrote Christmas book. I forget what it's called, but that's the book after Murder of 12. So I'm going to read that around Christmas time this year. And this episode made me think of the book Murder of 12. It's really good. I could not put it down. It was just so freaking awesome. And I think one of my favorites is books by Donald B-R-I-N is Leave 'Em Laughing or something. It's set on the stage and I absolutely love that one. And I loved Destination Murder, where Jessica's on a train and she has to solve the murder of someone on a train, and you have a lot of like train suspects who love trains. I really liked that one. I found that at Goodwill. So I really love them. They're just easy to read and they're easy to get into, and I can just picture like what celebrities could be the guest stars, and But the latest one that I read, The Murder of 12, I wish they would turn that into a TV movie with Angela Lansbury, but they probably won't. Anyway, let's get back into the episode. I'm sorry I went off the rails there about the books. I love reading, as well as watching this show, so. Okay, so as they get out of the car, Harry says that Edgar Allan Poe stayed there, and Jessica says, Harry, this inn has only been here for 10 years. He said, the old inn that burned down, he stayed at that one. So, Jessica notices that there's some woman staring at them as they're getting out of the car. And Harry goes in, and this woman turns out to be Grace, whom he is trying to sell it to. And there's a bunch of pictures of Edgar Allan Poe. There's one on the mantle above the fireplace. There's a picture of him in Mrs. Fletcher's room when Grace takes her upstairs and shows her up there. After she introduces her to... Sorry if you heard that ding. My friend was messaging me. But anyway, Grace shows Mrs. Fletcher upstairs, and she notices the picture of Mr. Poe, and she's like, those were Harry's idea. He doesn't exactly brighten up the place. And Mrs. Fletcher says, well, I hope I don't hear the ticking of the telltale heart, or I'm visited by a raven in the middle of the night. And Grace goes, we have no ravens. Even though this was clearly a joke, she's not a very nice woman. Like, not at all. Grace is opening the curtains in Mrs. Fletcher's room, and she looks out and she notices that there's a man and a woman kissing. This seems to upset her, and she leaves Mrs. Fletcher. Mrs. Fletcher opens the window and looks out and sees what she sees. She goes downstairs, and the man is named Jack. We'll get introduced to the woman a little bit later in the story. She's apparently a married woman, and Grace does not want Jack fooling around with the married guests. She says, you need to not go looking for trouble, and he says sarcastically, that's not what I was looking for. So the next day, I'm assuming it's the next day, I'm not sure if it's the same day, because that would be weird. I mean, it's unclear, but I'm thinking it's the next day, because we get introduced to the rest of the guests. We get introduced to Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, Mr. and Mrs. Crane, who are there from New Jersey playing a game of gin. And talk about being miscast. I mean, they do not look like they would be husband and wife in real life, and they don't really act like they're husband and wife. Of course, later we find out why. But they're playing gin, and Mrs. Crane does not know how to play gin. Don't feel bad, Mrs. Crane. I don't know how to play gin either. I know how to play Uno. But I don't know how to play gin, and I know how to play Go Fish. But that's about all the card games I know how to play. So, we then get introduced to Mr. Hollis, played by William Christopher, who played Father Mulcahy on MASH. He is a bird watcher. We also get introduced to Kyle Jordan, and he wonders where his wife Betty Jordan is, who happens to be the woman that Jack was kissing in that scene earlier. Yes, she's having an affair openly in the same place where her husband just so happens to be. Yeesh. Not good. So we then also get introduced to Joanna Benson, who is a nature enthusiast. And Jessica reveals that she's a mystery writer, and Mr. Hollis is absolutely amazed that she is a mystery writer. And Mr. Hollis asks her to go bird watching with him to find a Pacific bird that is apparently in Cabot Cove at this very moment. I can't pronounce the name of the bird. Um, so they go out bird watching. He brings her an extra pair of binoculars, and he goes off in one direction, and she goes off in another. And as she comes through the clearing, she notices that Mr. and Mrs. Crane are out on the boat, and it seems as if Mr. Crane is strangling his wife, and they both fall overboard. And Mrs. Fletcher is concerned that she's just witnessed a murder. Mr. Hollis comes through the clearing, and they both stare at the lake. That's in your visual aid. So, Sheriff Tupper shows up and says this is the easiest case he's ever done because Mrs. Fletcher witnessed the murder, and that's that. Or is it? Grace is shocked. Harry shows up and says, this could definitely put this place on the map. People love ghosts. He even implies that maybe there are ghosts from the old inn haunting the place, but there's no evidence of that throughout the episode. As they take Mr. Crane, Howard Crane, up to his room, and Seth appears to Dr. Seth Hazlitt. I love whenever William Window, Tom Bosley, and Angela Lansbury are together in a scene. You can tell that they really care about each other, and they always, play off of each other, and you can tell they were friends in real life. So, Mrs. Fletcher goes upstairs to see Mr. Crane. Mr. Crane says that he doesn't understand what happened. His wife just suddenly got hysterical and was acting weird and just seemed to jump into the water. He didn't push her, and he almost drowned himself because he doesn't know how to swim. So now Mrs. Fletcher is doubting herself. She's not so sure that what she saw was what she saw. She decides to go around questioning people. She goes into the boathouse to look at the boat, and she finds Jack and Betty kissing. She promises that she won't tell Mr. Jordan, and asks about the boat that Kyle brought in. She notices that there's a weird thing on the bottom of the boat, and Kyle doesn't know what it is, because he's not very good with boats or something. Mrs. Fletcher begins to believe that everything is not what it seems. They then find Mrs. Crane's body on the north side of the lake, and they take her body to Seth's office so he can do the examination. They then decide to arrest Mr. Crane. And Jessica decides to go into town um, so she can talk to Mr. Crane and also see what Seth says about the examination of the body. Mr. Crane reveals that it makes no sense that his wife drowned because she was an Olympic swimmer. She also got a gold medal for it years before this. And he does not have any relatives, or no, he doesn't have any children, so they're not set to inherit his money, but he does have a cousin that he has not seen for years, but he doesn't like his cousin. He doesn't know where his cousin is. And he says this whole thing makes no sense and that he didn't kill her. He has no idea what happened when he was out on that lake with her. It made absolutely no sense. So they go to Seth's office, and Seth says she did not die from drowning. She was hit with a blunt object, and there's glass in her head. I'm not entirely sure if it was a bottle, but it doesn't look like it. It looks kind of like glass that you would find from a lens. And then there is dirt and sand in her lungs, as she was drowned the rest of the way on the shallow end, like where the shore is. So now they have. So the conclusion from this is that Howard was taken out of the lake as soon as she went under and he went under. So there's no way that he could have gotten out of bed and went over and killed her because Seth had given him some sort of sedative to knock him out. So now somebody else had killed her. Mrs. Fletcher goes back to the inn and she's looking at books, and she talks to Grace, and she looks at Grace's register and notices that when the Cranes called, there were 2 different reservations from the same number. So when Mrs. Fletcher calls that number, it turns out to be Joanna's answering machine. So Mrs. Fletcher goes up to Joanna's room and asks her about why she got her answering machine, and she reveals that her and Howard have been having an affair behind Mrs. Crane's back, and she came to the inn to make sure that he was going to break up with his wife, and now she's afraid that he might have killed his wife to be with her. And she's not this nature buff, because apparently she ran naked through the woods. I mean, she's really dedicated to this, pretending thing that she's got going on. So that no one would know that she was there to see Mr. Crane. So that was one twist I didn't see coming. So suddenly Sheriff Tupper shows up Then Kyle Jordan comes into his room with his wife, Betty, and he says, "Where were you?" And she says, "Oh, I went for a bike ride, I told you." And he says, "No, darling. I went up to the bike ride to get a bike to surprise you. And the man told me that no one had come by to get a bike but me. So again, I ask you, where were you?" And she reveals her affair with Jack, and he decides to go punch Jack. Or wait, no, he has a gun. He decides to shoot Jack. Sheriff Tupper shows up at that very moment to arrest Jack because he has a warrant for his arrest, because he apparently assaulted a married woman in another county, in another state, and he turns out to be Grace's brother. And it seems like all arrows point to him as Mrs. Crane's lover. Mrs. Fletcher gathers in the boathouse and begins to explain what she believes happened. Mrs. Crane faked her death so that she would inherit her husband's money because he sold off a bunch of companies or whatever. So he was a very rich person. And she was going to fake her death and then somehow get the money. Mrs. Fletcher deduces that she put on her wetsuit, got in the boat first, put on her wetsuit, put her dress on over her wetsuit, and then waited for the perfect moment to get a witness to make it seem as if her husband was trying to kill her. That witness just so happened to be Mrs. Fletcher, which was planned by Mrs. Crane's accomplice. She then swam to the north side of the lake because she was a good swimmer, an Olympic swimmer, only to find that her partner was on the other side and betrayed her and killed her. So Amos is about to arrest Jack for the murder of Mrs. Crane, but Mrs. Fletcher points out that that's not possible, that it's not Jack. Mrs. Crane's lover was a kind and gentle man, and Jack didn't know anything about boats. It was Mr. Hollis, aka the cousin that stood to inherit Mr. Crane's money. Mrs. Fletcher points this out that he was out of breath when he came running, and he had different binoculars than when he did when he went off. He hit her in the head with his binoculars, and the glass that they found in her head was from the binoculars. At first he denies this, but then eventually admits it and says he had to eliminate them both ordinary to inherit the money. But he doesn't get the money because he ends up going to jail, and it turns out that the bird he said he was looking for isn't even in Cabot Cove, and that's how Mrs. Fletcher figured it out. Grace, in the end, decides to go and not buy the inn, and it's also implied when Mrs. Fletcher slams the door and Edgar Allan Poe's picture falls down in front of the fire that it probably caught on fire and the inn burned down again. And that's the episode. The only guest star that I recognized was William Christopher, who played Father Mulcahy on MASH. But let's go over the rest of the guest stars. We're not going to do John Astin right now because this is not his last episode yet. But our murder victim was played by Susan Blanchard, who played Mrs. Crane. So let's see what she has done in her career. She is still alive. She is known for They Live, Prince of Darkness, Falcon Crest, and Policewoman. Her last known credit is the TV movie Adventures in Babysitting. Everyone says that movie is awesome. I need to watch it on HBO Max. She guest starred on The Love Boat. This is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. Magnum P.I., Young Maverick, The New Maverick, MASH, so she shares credit with William Christopher. Beacon Hill, and she was in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and she was on one of my favorite soap operas, All My Children, as Mary in 1971, which I didn't see those episodes, so that's interesting. William Christopher played our murderer, and like I said, I recognized him almost immediately as Father Mulcahy from MASH. I wonder if this is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. Let's see. He died in 2016 at the age of 84. I did not know that. That's sad. He was known for, of course, MASH, The Fortune Cookie, Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and Team Knight Rider. His last known credit was playing a minister on Days of Our Lives. Father Tobias. Wow. He guest starred on Diagnosis Murder. He did some voiceover work for the Smurfs. Oh, I love the Smurfs. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. Oh, that's so sad. But he plays the murderer in this after playing a priest, so I mean, I find that to be fascinating. He guest starred on The Love Boat, Columbo. He was in The Carol Burnett Show, That Girl, Gomer Pike, Hogan's Heroes, The Andy Griffith Show. So he had a long career. He was a really great actor. I liked him. I really did. He was my favorite on MASH. The jealous husband, Kyle Jordan, was played by Charles Frank. I did not recognize him. He's known for The Right Stuff, All My Children. He played Dr. Jeff Martin. Oh yeah, I did recognize him. Filthy Rich and Wonder Woman. His last known credit is Dynasty Warriors, a video game. He did voiceover work in 2018. He also guest starred on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, Madlock. He'll appear in another episode of Murder, She Wrote. And he also guest starred on Designing Women. I love Designing Women. It's one of my favorite shows. Lawrence Luckinbill, oh boy, that's a weird last name, played Howard Crane. He is still alive. He is known for Star Trek, The Final Frontier, Cocktail, Lucy and Desi, and The Boys in the Band. His last known credit is a TV movie called The Exonerated as a prosecutor. He'll appear in a handful of other episodes of Murder, She Wrote, and he also was on All My Children as Dr. Walsh. Don't know. But I'll go over the rest of his credentials when we get to his other episodes. Grace was played by Lee Merriweather. She is still alive. She is known for Batman the Movie, Barnaby Jones, The Ultimate Gift, and All My Children as Ruth Martin. Oh yeah, she took over as Ruth when the original Ruth Martin died on All My Children. Amazing how many people in this episode was on All My Children. Her last known credit is 2019's Love and Debt. Never heard of it. Oh, she gets started in Wizards of Waverly Place, Touched by an Angel, and she'll appear in 2 other episodes of Murder, She Wrote, so we'll go over more of her credits later. She was really good in this episode. Joanna the Mistress was played by Lee Purcell. Let's see what she's known for. She's known for J.L. Ranch, Kids vs. Monsters, Valley Girl, and Big Wednesday. She's apparently going to be in a movie called Into the Fire. Her last known credit is a TV movie called Sick. She guest starred on Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, and she'll appear in lots of other episodes of Murder, She Wrote, so we'll go over more of her credentials later on. Charles Taylor played the role of Jack. He is known for Mask, Knight Rider, The National History of Parking Lots, I kid you not, and Code of Violence. He's only been in 13 things. He was on Days of Our Lives as Kylie. His last known credit is 2009 Saving Grace B. Jones. I don't know, I've never heard of that. This is his only episode of Murder, She Wrote. And Betty was played by Lauren Towers, or Talvines. She is known for The Love Boat as the cruise director Julie. Oh wow. She did some voiceover work for the X-Files game, The Doom Generation, and Charlie's Angels. Her last known credit is this year's Potato Dreams of America. She guest starred on Twin Peaks in 2017. She's done a lot of voiceover work for video games. Hotel, this is her only episode of Murder, She Wrote. Fantasy Island, Charlie's Angels, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, a TV movie. So, yeah, she had a really long career. And that's it. That's all our guest stars. I really liked this episode. It had a lot of twists and turns in it. It was really good, and I really loved seeing Father Mulcahy, William Christopher, in this episode as the murderer. Thank you so much for your continued support, and I can't believe I reached 100 subscribers. It just means that you all love what I'm doing, and I appreciate it more than you will ever know. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Have a good day or night, depending on whenever you listen to this, and happy crime solving, and I'll see you in the next one.